You've been in LA now for 3 days. What are your thoughts on the geography, on the area? There
is a tremendous amount more horror than I anticipated.
Yeah.
I thought really the horror would be that there's this kind of seamy underbelly of this wealth. Like there is when you go to New York, we're like, oh, like, yes, these rich people, but like it's a little shady and they're probably some of them are kids and some of them are, doing so much drugs. No, like you're literally driving through Black Hawk Down to get to like Hollywood.
There are certain parts of LA where the apocalypse has happened.
Yeah.
It's happened. There are tent cities. You have medieval living situations in terms of like no fucking bathrooms,
right,
no running water, and then you have diseases coming back that have been gone for years, things like dysentery that come from filthy living conditions. And I think our Uber driver said today to us before she went on a rant about the Jews. Remember that? She goes, the Beverly Hills, she goes, is owned by the Jews, all Jews. I was like, okay. She told us there was 145,000 homeless people in Los Angeles.
I estimated a little bit lower when we went to Skid Row.
Yeah, because Ray's just looking at Skid Row. He's like, they can help these people. There's a few hundred people. Just helpless people. Helpless man. First of all, we got to Skid Row. We rolled the window down, and 3 people emerged from a tent and went, Ray? And that's when we had to leave, because I said, I don't know how many people.
I have a very specific fan base.
You're the only guy that ate at Nobu that could have went to Skid Row and also fit in there perfectly. Like, absolutely perfectly. But, I mean, how do you fix that problem? It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. I mean, there's no projects here, which is interesting.
Well, they're right. There is public housing.
Okay, but not like tower. Because I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, the idea of there's problems with vertically placing cheap housing or housing for the poor. Like,
yes, it seems so.
I'm just saying, like, there are pitfalls that to that method of doing it. But at the end of the day, like, how else are you going to do it when you have 145,000 people?
And it's like, how much worse is it than tent cities?
Right. Well, they talk about like how like you might get mugged. People get mugged in the hallway because the visibility and like the corners and like the kind of diffusion of responsibility that happens when you live in this big building and you're not paying like your own rent. And like, yeah, sure, but like dysentery. Botulism, that's occurring on the streets. Like, maybe we deal with that when we come to it. You know?
Yeah, those things are a lot worse. But what are some of the positives? Other than the return of the diseases, the post-apocalyptic kind of hellscape.
Oh, it's lovely. I want to move here.
There are nice things about it.
I mean, there are
nice things, but let's not spend too much time on the breakdown of society.
Right.
The fall of a civil society and a fall of a social order. Let's not spend an inordinate amount of time on that when there are so many positives.
Well, here's the reality. If you're gonna experience the end of the world on the front line, which these people are, why not do it in a place with a nice climate?
It has a beautiful climate.
It's wonderful.
And that's what people don't talk about when they talk about our inability to house hundreds of thousands of people who then shit on the street.
Right.
They don't mention that it is a nice climate here.
Honestly.
They don't balance it out and go, but dysentery, but plague is back, but lovely weather.
I'm living in a better place than I was when we first did the podcast.
Yes.
I would talk about it frequently, how I'm not saying it's Skid Row where I was living. I'm not trying to, but I lived in a windowless room, which in the summer got incredibly hot and muggy and just disgusting. And plus, I never threw my garbage out. So, like, would it be worse to live on the street in Skid Row? Maybe, like, on, again, the diseases and the microbacteria. But I feel like, yeah, it's like camping in the fall. It's nice.
No, your living situation when I first met you, and your driving situation. I mean, you drove a car where the window was broken. The window had rolled down and it was broken. And the first time I met you,
there was no heat.
There was no heat in the car, and you said we have to smoke cigarettes to keep ourselves warm.
Right.
And that's when I kind of picked up the occasional ciggy again, because I had quit for years. I quit smoking cigarettes for years. I was actually still drinking and smoking pot, before I stopped smoking cigarettes.
Right.
I got rid of cigarettes, and then I met Ray, and it's not your fault.
Yeah.
But I met you, and then driving back to Long Island, you were like, listen, we don't have heat in the car, but here's what we can do. We can smoke cigarettes on the way back to Long Island. And I thought that was a fair compromise and a good way to get heat. And then we would always go to that Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, or a diner.
Right.
The Taco Bell, Pizza
More
Hut.
often than Taco Bell.
Yeah, the Taco Bell, because it was 3 a.m. There wasn't a lot open at that point.
No.
And then we would sit in the parking lot of the Taco Bell, Pizza Hut and recap the evening.
Right. Over some nachos Bel Grande.
What's crazy about this area to me is that it gets a little worse, even since I've been here. It just creeps in. There's a few more tents.
Right.
There's a guy with a shopping cart going down the block.
Yeah.
And it's more and more, and you wonder how long that takes until there's some type of breaking point.
Well, I think because we went to Skid Row, but that was like the second day. But like on the way from LAX just to Hollywood, like in the nicer areas,
It's even worse because you're prepared for Skid Row.
right. And it's like, and there's a level of like, oh, these people are like at the brink. And it's sad, but like just the kind of level of gradual horror and decay.
What was interesting about a lot of the people at Skid Row is they did seem happy.
They were at, look.
There was and this is just an observation. I'm not saying that. Don't be like. I'm saying the outward appearance of a lot of these people was they were jubilant.
Well, I believe I think they were getting their buzz on a bit.
But it makes you think about life. It really does.
Yeah.
You go down Skid Row. It's the most horrible conditions ever, and there are people there that are dancing. And they're happy. And then you meet people that live in these big, beautiful homes, and they're not that happy. So fuck Bernie Sanders and fuck all you people that think you just need everything. You can make do with less. You'll be fine. Let it go. Manage expectations. This is what your expectations are killing you. You expect a good life. Stop that. Enough of that.
You think about the yacht, how much that yacht you want. How much is the gas to fill it up?
Right.
You don't even think about that.
You
That's
don't.
the thing. It's a burden you don't think about.
Right. But my whole thing is be happy with less. You know what I mean?
Well, look, we've tended to go the opposite route with that over the years.
Yeah.
But the idea
meaning
that,
what?
Well, a lot of people argue that like poor people are actually happier if you look at it. The rich are very unhappy. It's like, which is like a comforting feeling, a comforting expression.
I'm not saying that poor people are happy. I'm saying I went to Skid Row and I saw people there that were happier than people that I knew, even if it was momentary.
Right.
Even if it was induced by a substance.
Sure.
I'm not making a socio-political point. You got to observe things.
Right.
And you can't crowd an ideology. Like, you can't cram an ideology into every observation. You can't look at somebody dancing in the street and go, but I bet it. Sometimes you just got to take it at face value and go, yes, this gentleman would probably rather be in another situation.
Well,
however,
humans are incredibly adaptable. And the one thing I will say for the people at Skid Row, I don't think they're going to drive down to Beverly Hills and lusting over that. Like, because a big part of it's like about, comparative wealth and
yes.
And you're not really thinking about that flamingo in the front yard of that nice mansion.
You're understanding this is what it is.
Yeah.
You're not reaching.
The reach is really what gets you.
The reach is what gets you.
So
that's part of our new motivational program.
This new shirt we'll be printing.
Yeah, the reach is what gets you. Stay low. Stay low to the ground.
Yeah. But it's also not just, look, not everything about like what I was surprised about was just like horror.
Yeah.
It was more just like a lot of LA. Now, once we got close to Hollywood and we went to Malibu, like a lot of beautiful spots. But a lot of it was just like, just the worst parts of Long Island. Like a lot of it felt like the LIE spread out over like a much wider
But it's
surface
not
area.
funny.
Yeah.
Like Long Island is funny.
Right.
Because the people in Long Island are retarded.
Right.
And that's what makes it funny. because they're retarded, and yet somehow many of them have managed to acquire things that they never should have had and still aren't happy with and maintain a sense of victimhood. They're always the aggrieved party no matter what happens. They inherit houses. They complain about the taxes on the houses they inherit. It just never ends. Someone's always coming trying to kill them. MS-13's always in the window with a machete going at them. And the only person who'll save him is Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity and his Freedom Concert. There's nothing better than watching people in Long Island, white people, who had a culture back when it required some degree of boats and learning how to whatever, and being appreciating that you lived by the sea and the ocean. But then once people traded that in for just the suburban sloth of it all,
right,
they are cultureless people like Connecticut. So when white people have no culture, they start going to country western bands. They start pretending they're country western. So Sean Hannity used to have these Freedom Concerts where Montgomery Gentry would perform, and Long Island guys would go, and Montgomery Gentry would be like, "How was a cowboy?" And they'd be like, "Yes, me." And there's no real culture that they identify with. They're just they want to be "I'm white, I'm proud of my family and my faith, even though I don't like my family and I haven't been to church."
At some point, and it's after I grew was a kid, but Deer Park, where I grew up, acquired multiple line dancing bars.
Yeah, this is what it is. Yeah, because what else? They have nothing else to do. If you need, go get a potato and put a Marlboro Light in its mouth and watch that, and then press play on your phone.